Amazing. Yeah, and because this will be recorded, I think some people already emailed in to say they've not able to attend today, but this will, for all of you anyway, this will go onto our website. We'll try and get it onto there by later today, so you can watch it back, or if any of your colleagues aren't able to attend, they can watch it. So just briefly to go through the agenda. So we'll start with talking through the aims and objectives of the programme. Actually, sorry, before I start, just to introduce myself, I'm Bryony Jeston. I'm the project officer on the Skills Bootcamps programme. And I work closely with all of our kind of current providers that are delivering boot camps. I've got a couple of colleagues on the call, so Sherry Humphreys, who's helping with the session, and then my colleague Stuart, who's also on the call to also help with any questions you may have. Okay, so yeah, the agenda, we'll go through the aims and objectives of the programme. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with this, just to a bit of a recap. We'll talk through the different kinds of skills bootcamp models. So just to explain to you how if you're designing or coming up with a bid, how that may look in terms of whether you're the training provider, how you may be linking up with employers and things like that. We'll talk through what the Call 3 offer is. So that's the lots and projects that we're opening this afternoon for you to apply for. Just do a bit of an overview of the quality assurance, our quality assurance processes, and how we can support you with Ofsted. We'll talk about learner eligibility, so you're familiar with that. Importantly, how you would, if you were successful in your bid, we'll explain how we pay you. So what are those payment milestones and how you achieve those. I'll talk through sort of a bit about the paperwork that's going to be on our website this afternoon. So the specifications that you'll need to read thoroughly before applying, and the application paperwork that you're going to need to fill out. There's a few key takeaways we want you to remember when you take away from here, just to help you when writing your application. And we will go over sort of what that provisional timeline looks like in terms of when you can expect to receive a decision on any application you make, and when we expect delivery to start. Yeah, and as I said, any questions we'll address at the end. So if you just pop those in the chat as we go through. Okay, next slide, please, Sherry. Okay, so the aims and objectives of the Skills Bootcamp programme, for anyone who's not familiar or needs a bit of a recap. So Skills Bootcamps are all about employers, they're all about addressing the needs of the employers within our regions. That's within the LEP region. So that also includes North Somerset, as well as South Gloucestershire, Bath and North East Somerset, and Bristol, and the wider economy. And we do expect the employer to very much be at the centre of any application you submit to us. So you will be asked to really evidence that you understand the needs of employers in our region, and that you've kind of built your curriculum around that. So Skills Bootcamps deliver targeted interventions to meet short to medium term demand. So it's about understanding what are those roles, those job gaps that we have now that we need to be filling through these bootcamps. Skills bootcamps are delivered at level 3 to 5, so that's something to think about. So it is to fill those sort of medium to high level vacancies. For green skills, it can be delivered at level 2. It's really important that you read the specification for the lot you're applying for, because it will say in there what the minimum level is in terms of training. So skills bootcamps support adults into new jobs. They also upskill employees of existing employees. Employers can upskill their own workforce to take on new roles of responsibilities within their company. And they also support the self-employed and freelancers to gain new work opportunities or contracts. Skills bootcamps should last up to 16 weeks, so no longer than 16 weeks. And learners must receive a minimum of 60 guided learning hours. It's 100 guided learning hours for digital, but we're not actually launching any digital lots today, but just to be aware. So but otherwise it's the minimum 60 guided learning hours, and that is within the specification. And guided learning hours are those hours that it's that time that a learner spends being taught or instructed by or participating in educational training under the guidance of a lecturer or supervisor or tutor. Skills bootcamps address the needs of adults aged 19 plus, so they're open to those that are 19 plus, and they can be the learners can be either self-employed, employed, full-time, part-time, career changes, unemployed. So yeah, very flexible, open to everybody. And another key thing about skills bootcamps is they are flexible, and they need to be flexible, and that needs to come out in your bid. So it needs to be, they need to kind of work around people's existing commitments. So we'll be looking for sort of blended solutions. Some of the boot camps will need to be face-to-face, so it's kind of thinking about the hours to deliver it and things like that, making sure they are accessible to everybody. So next slide, please, Sherry. So different skills bootcamp models. So you could be on this call today because you're an employer, and you may actually have the capacity to deliver the training yourself. Yeah, if you do, that's fantastic, and that's something we can fund. So you're almost like delivering the training yourself to your own employees because you've recognised a skills gap. You may be a training provider on the call, and you are looking to deliver a bespoke training solution for a particular employer. That's a model that works really well. So you're linking up with an employer in the region who has that skills gap they need to fill. They can't deliver the training themselves, but they're going to work with you. You're going to deliver the training for that company. So together you can kind of submit a bid together. Or you could be a training provider and you're sort of looking to run a skills bootcamp, which is more of a generic course that you're going to open to lots of different employees from a range of companies, but also like the general public, so career changes, unemployed. So those are kind of models. Skills bootcamps are free to learners. That's really key. So the learner never pays. They're always free to the learners. But where an employer is using the skills bootcamp to upskill their own employees, they will be required to pay a small amount. So that's 10% if they're an SME and 30% for a large organisation. So that's 10% of the cost per learner or 30% of the cost per learner. Next slide, please. Thanks, Sherry. So we're launching today, so at noon, so we've already launched. The paperwork will go on our website this afternoon. It may already be on there now. So these are the lots and projects that are available for you to apply for. So we have two lots open for creative, so TV and film and production. The maximum cost per learner that you can apply for are there on the screen. So 4,500 for TV and film and 4,000 for production. And the total funding we've got available to grant funders 315,000. So yeah, these are just looking for kind of solutions that kind of upskill mainly our current creative workforce, whether they're sort of entry level or they're people that have experienced. We recognise there's a need to upskill a lot of this workforce is freelancers. Traditionally, they haven't always got the time to kind of spend on training and development. So the skills bootcamp is, because it's flexible, this is a really good opportunity to give them those skills that they need and kind of future-proof them for what that industry needs. We're also opening for a lot in health and care. You will notice that some of these were also open in call 1 and call 2. So this is where we have funding still remaining. So health and care, really key area for our region. So 4,000 maximum cost per learner of £4,000. It's pretty open, that category. So it's just really thinking, is at that level 3. So thinking about what the region needs in terms of health and care trainings. There's a few examples there. Specialist care assistant training in children's residential homes, workforce, laboratory technicians, leadership and management skills in health and care. So it is pretty broad, that one. And there's total funding we have remaining £80,000. Okay, next slide, please, Sherry. Okay, and then green skills. So we have a total pot of £250,000 for to deliver some more further skills bootcamps this year in green skills. And those are the areas, these are the gaps we have where we're looking for some more skills bootcamps. So retrofit assessing, advising and coordinating. So sort of skills bootcamps in those. So that's kind of retrofit advice for domestic and commercial properties. Greener transport. So anything linked to sort of manufacture, maintenance and recycling of low emission vehicles, could be public transport, rail. So really looking at sort of like upskilling of mechanics to service these vehicles, and also to support people entering entering that sector. And then a lot project in anything around construction, engineering and green skills. So sort of those green techniques within construction and engineering. So we're looking for some really sort of innovative projects around that. So yeah, £250,000 available across green skills. Next slide. Yeah, so with as I said, that will all those specifications will go onto the website this afternoon. There'll be one per lot, so there'll be one on there for creative, one for green skills, and one for health and care. So do read those thoroughly. We wanted today just to give you a bit of a sort of overview of our quality assurance processes and how we as a combined authority support our providers. So from April 23, you probably know that Ofsted started inspecting all providers of skills boot camps, and providers are inspected against the evaluation criteria set out in the Further Education and Skills Inspection Frame Handbook. These slides will be available so you can have a look at that. So all new providers do receive an Ofsted monitoring visit within 18 months of starting delivery. Many of our providers have already had that monitoring visit, and actually they've done really, really well, which we're really pleased with. That what we do as a combined authority, we do very much support our new providers in readiness for that inspection. We have Stuart, who's on the call today, who's our quality assurance officer, who will, if you are successful, he will sort of work with you to make sure that we can support in any way we can to make sure you're prepared for that. So Ofsted will visit. The DfE can also do their own quality visits. That tends to be now if the provider also has a national contract. So if the contract is just with us, then that's normally just ourselves that will visit you. But we, irrelevant of whether DfE or Ofsted do visit you, we as a combined authority will also do an annual monitoring visit, and that is very much in a supportive capacity to make sure that we can improve outcomes for yourselves and for learners and our residents in the region. As well as the annual monitoring visits that my colleague Stuart will do, we always have regular progress meetings with our providers. We do sort of audit checks on evidence and things like that. We do sort of learner satisfaction surveys. That helps us evaluate how the programme's going, and obviously we can feed anything back into yourselves. And to ensure that kind of quality and that we're sort of meeting our targets, we do sort of assess providers against KPIs, again, more of in a sort of supportive manner, so we can pick up any sort of issues earlier on and help you and work with you to ensure you achieve the KPIs for your skills bootcamp, and we as a combined authority achieve our KPIs that were set by the Department for Education. So other support, the range of support that our team provides. So Stuart, who's on the call, he has already sort of done some Ofsted training to groups of existing providers, and he'll be looking to do more of that through sort of those, Ofsted monitoring visit forums. Actually, the last one was really good. We had a couple of our existing providers who've been through it come and do talks to new providers, which everyone said they found that really useful to hear from actually providers that have been through that process. We can provide you with key document templates. So if you are new to it, we can provide you with some kind of best practice examples of templates that can help you. And following the visits, we will kind of provide you with sort of development plans, things to work on, and also the opportunity to connect with other providers so you can kind of support one another. Okay, next slide, please. So learner eligibility, you probably already know this, but just to recap, so adults, slightly different on our programme is that from some of our other funded provision is that the learners themselves can live outside of the LEP geographical area as long as they're enrolling with the intention of working within this region. So but what I would say is this is a kind of, we have got KPIs around this. So we would kind of closely monitor it to make sure there weren't too many living outside of the LEP region. But we also recognise that, this is all about filling those vacancies within this region. So if people do live outside of the region, that's absolutely fine. We would just be asking you to speak with them to make sure they're committed to looking for work in the region. And also, if it's an employer who's using the bootcamp to upskill their own employees, it's, it is possible that a number of their employees don't live within the geographical area, but they do work here. So that's, again, absolutely fine, but we will sort of monitor those to make sure we don't have too many people that are outside of region. The training is open to all adults aged 19 plus. It does slightly depend on when the Skills Bootcamp starts in terms of when you take that point of them turning 19, but that will all be within the specifications, so do read that. Learners must have the right to work in the UK. They must meet residency requirements, and you must not actively recruit learners that live outside of England. There are a few exceptions, but yeah, and that's all in the documentation. I think it's mainly sort of if that provision isn't available in the area they live, perhaps they just don't live over the border in Wales, but that Skills Bootcamps training is not available to them, but also they are looking for work here and it's beneficial. So do have a read of that, but that's sort of a bit of an overview of the learner eligibility. Next slide, Sherry, please. So if you are successful and you are offered, we will send you a grant offer letter, and that will be sort of for the total maximum grant funding you can receive if every one of your learners receives the full cost per learner. With Skills Bootcamps, however, it is paid on results. So you will receive 40% of the cost per learner once the learner has completed 14 qualifying days and a minimum of 10 guided learning hours. They don't need to have attended 14 sessions, they just need to remain on the course after 14 days. You count from day one, even if it's delivery only 1 day a week, you just count from day one, 14 days. If the learner hasn't dropped out and they've received a minimum of 10 guided learning hours, then you can claim your first payment, which is 40% of your cost per learner. The second payment of 30% is paid upon course completion. So that's when all aspects of the training have been completed and the learner has received an offer of an interview. That's really important. So with a bootcamp, we class as the learner has not having not completed until they have had an offer of an interview. So it's always that completion is classed as training plus interview. Learners on bootcamps need to receive a guaranteed interview. The only exceptions would be if the learner is being upskilled by their employer. That's not always relevant. So in that case, we'd be looking for that employer to offer them a new responsibility within the company, or if they're self-employed learner, offer of an interview again isn't probably relevant. So what we'll be looking for there is that you've worked with that learner to help them develop a business plan or self-employment action plan of how they're going to achieve new work contracts. So yeah, so that's there. And when you fill in your application, there'll be a lot of questions in there that will kind of drive you to think about how you're to evidence to us that those interviews are there and that you've got that sort of employer engagement in place to make sure people can get kind of guaranteed interviews. And the third payment is paid, of 30% is paid upon successful outcome. So a successful outcome for a learner on the Skills Bootcamps is either that they have been offered a new role using the skills they've gained through the bootcamp, or they've been offered new responsibilities or a new role within the current company where the employer is co-funding them to upskill as their employee. So, or a successful outcome would be a self-employed individual or freelancer gaining some sort of a new responsibility or new work contract as a result of the training. Okay, next slide, please, Sherry. So as I said, specifications will be online this afternoon. There's one per lot, so one for creative, one for health and care, and one for green skills. So do read, before you start your application process, please do read the specifications thoroughly. Within that, it will detail the specific projects that you can apply for within the lot, which obviously went through earlier. It will tell you again the funding amounts that are available. It will tell you in there clearly what the closing date is for applications, so do read that thoroughly, and also the process of how to submit your application. Really key, within each specification, it outlines the objectives of the project you're applying for. So do read those thoroughly and make sure that when you're applying that you're making sure you do meet all of those objectives. And it also includes kind of general information that we've gone over today about eligibility and a bit more around performance management and how we sort of, you know, how we track that once you are a provider of ours. So we say that they may already be on there already, but if not, at the latest, it will be by 5 o'clock today. The link is there for you to link to the webpage where you find the specifications is there on that slide. But I think, Sherry, could you put, or somebody pop that into the chat so everyone has that to hand? Thank you. Next slide, please, Sherry. Yeah, so along with the specifications, you will find the application form that you need to fill in. This will outline the evaluation and assessment process we go through to make sure it's a fair and transparent process. So do have a read of that. It also will clearly outline all the documents you need to complete. So as well as this application form, there are a few appendices you need to fill out. So do read, it's all listed in there. And I think it's almost like a tick box thing. So do make sure you have filled everything in. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what the application form covers. So the first sort of question that you're asked to complete is around project planning. So, so it's about how have you designed your project, your skills boot camps, what learnings have you had from like previous skills boot camps or similar delivery. If you haven't delivered skills boot camps before, any kind of similar delivery, what your learnings are and how you're taking it into this one. You'll be asked to complete a curriculum plan. So we do realise that that could change or evolve, but it's really sort of making sure that you have thought through like what that plan will look like. So what is the curriculum at a high level on a week by week basis? What will those learners, what will be covered by that course? So you will be asked to fill that in and submit that. You'll be asked around your plans for employability skills training. So all the learners, that needs to kind of be very much part of the boot camp, that wraparound support, because it's obviously all about getting these individuals into new roles. You'll be asked to fill out a project delivery plan. So that's more sort of like how you'll hit them, when you will hit certain milestones, how many cohorts you'll run, how many learners will be in each cohort. And you'll be asked to kind of identify any risks or issues and how you may mitigate those. There's a question, the next question is around value for money. So in this question, there's a separate financial annex that you'll need to fill in. This asks you to break down the costs of your project. So you'll do a complete breakdown of the cost of your project and then also show us how that equates to the cost per learner that you're asking for. And then there's also sort of a written question where you're asked to explain why your skills bootcamp is value for money and that you've kind of benchmarked it. So yeah, really important question. Employer engagement, that's the third question in the application form. As we said, this is all about employers, all about filling those gaps we have. So we do expect employers to be engaged in your project. So you'll be asked to list employers that you're working with. That could be on co-designing your curriculum. It could be that they're going to come in and deliver some workshops to the learners. It could be that they have vacancies and they're happy to support with, offering guaranteed interviews. So you will be asked, and that's really important that you do show that employer engagement is there already, how they're engaged and how you will retain that employer engagement throughout the bootcamp and grow those networks even further. And we will be looking for some letters of support from employers. Please make sure they are from, try and make those specific to this region. That's really important. So we will be looking for some sort of evidence through letters of support from local employers. Fourth question is all around learner enrolment. So this is around sort of what your marketing approach will be, how you make sure you're engaging underrepresented groups, and what your initial assessment process will look like. That's really important to make sure we've got the right learners, make sure the training is right for the learners, and make sure that they are, obviously people that are going to be successful and go on to gain those new roles and responsibilities. Next slide, please, Sherry. There's a question around learner support, obviously really, really important in order to how you will support the learners to enable meaningful progression. So that's if they leave the course or find the course isn't suitable, and or just supporting people's changes in circumstances. So there's a question around that. And then there's a question around learner progression. So what will those progression outcomes look like? You'll be asked to really clearly identify what those roles are that these learners will go into, and how you ensure that they receive those guaranteed interviews. And very importantly, how you maintain that learner engagement after the training completion. So once the learner has completed the training, you will have up to 6 months for them to achieve a positive outcome. So we would expect you to kind of keep that contact with that learner, that engagement and that support there. So because they have, you've got up to 6 months here to get them into a new role. So that needs to be articulated in your application, how you will support learners to progress. There is a question around quality of provision. So we'll be asking you about your quality assurance processes and your processes for continuous improvement. And finally, there is a question around data collection. So how will you coordinate the collection of data and evidence that we ask for? The reason that is in there is because we do ask for quite a lot of data on the learners and employers, and you do need to save down evidence before we can pay. So things like copies of certificates they receive, registers of attendance, evidence of an email from an employer offering them interview, things like that. So it's got quite a bit of work for you in terms of data collection. Don't underestimate that. And obviously when you're costing your project, think about what you need there in order to kind of make sure you've got someone in place who can do that data collection and evidence that we'll be asking for. So that's all the questions. Yeah, just to so I think I mentioned, but the financial annex, which is part of the value for money question, is a separate appendix that will be on the website also this afternoon. So you have the application form, the financial annex, and the curriculum plan is also separate. When you get to that question, the application form, it will say see appendix, because so that's a separate form that you need to fill in. With both the financial annex and the curriculum plan, you should complete one per pathway. So some skills boot camps have different pathways. Easiest example is HGV driver training, where some are going from like car license to Cat C and some are going from Cat C to Cat D plus E. Part of the same skills boot camps, but different pathways. They are costed differently and they have a slightly different curriculum plan depending on the learner's entry point. So for those, please complete separate financial annexes and separate curriculum plans. And I haven't mentioned it on here, but there is a due diligence form for you to fill in as well. So it does ask for things like copies of accounts and things, because we will do some due diligence checks on providers before sort of recommending anyone for funding. Please ensure that ensure any statements, claims made in your application are evidence. So that's just really think about when you're completing your application, anything you're stating, try and provide evidence alongside it, because that's what we'll be looking for. So anything you state, so it's kind of backing up with evidence that you have. Yeah, and just to say that will all those documents again will be on our website this afternoon and definitely by 5 o'clock. Next slide, please. Yeah, and just a few key takeaways, the things we've probably already gone over, but just to kind of recap. So employer-centric, really, really important. So when you're designing your skills bootcamp and you're completing your application bid, make sure it is employer-centric. Training is free for learners. Employers must contribute either 10% or 30%. No longer than 16 weeks. So make sure the duration of your course is no longer than 16 weeks. And make sure it is at that minimum of 60 guided learning hours, or 100 if it's a digital course. Applications you should submit should be well evidenced with a clear need identified. So that's really important. So we need to, when we're assessing them, we'll be looking that you've built your skills bootcamp based on the evidence of a need and a clear pathway for that learner, direct line of sight to a job role or new responsibility. Applications should offer value for money. That's really important. And applications should demonstrate the impact and learnings from previous skills bootcamps or similar provision. Again, so make sure you do draw that out in your application. To remind you again, you will be required to submit letters of support from employers. So you'll have a month, I think it's 4 weeks to apply. So that's something you might want to look at quite early on, because obviously recognise it can take a while to get those letters of support from employers. And learner support is vital, so please make sure really thinking about that in your bid, and including for those who withdraw. Really important. This is funded, that it's the right, that this programme, we do the best thing by our residents. So really looking at the learner support, and again, providers responsible for ensuring that individuals who self-refer onto the bootcamp receive a guaranteed interview. So obviously if they're upskilling by the employer, the interview isn't relevant, like we said. But for those that do self-refer because they're looking for a new role, then you need to make sure that those guaranteed interviews are there. And do not underestimate the administrative process. So I think when you're sort of costing your projects in that financial annex, do you think about how much resource you do need to kind of administer this. Next slide, please, Sherry. So a bit of a provisional timeline. So we're launching today, and we close for applications at noon on the 22nd of July. All these dates will be on our website and in the specification. The bid, as soon as the bids come in, almost next day, the bid assessment process takes place. It's shared with the independent panel. Now, realistically, funding decisions will not be approved until the 20th of September. It sounds like a long time, but it's actually, by the time we've gone through, we have to do due diligence checks on every organisation. We have to go through, the bids have to be assessed, meetings held, and there's various sort of governance processes we go through before. So I think you need to plan for that. You would receive funding decisions from this call around the 20th of September, with contracts awarded at the end of September and provision ready to start on the 1st of October. As it stands at the moment, all delivery, so the training itself needs to complete by the 31st of March 25. As it stands, the last couple of years, DfE have written to us around September, October time, saying that where required, there is a bit of flexibility to shift the completion date into the next financial year, but we haven't had that confirmation yet. So we need to plan. So when you're doing your planning, it needs to kind of fit in between October and the 31st of March, that training. So you need to be planning for that. Obviously, we would communicate once you're up and running if there was any sort of flexibility that we're then offered from the DfE. Next slide. I think that may be it. Yeah, so again, that's the link to our website. So if you can get all the documentation this afternoon, I think that's already been popped into the chat. And that was about it. So we'll just we'll go to questions if we bring down the presentation. I think, Sherry, if you could just talk through any questions we have, if we have any.
Okay, at the moment, on the chat, there is just one question. It says, could we deliver 60 guided learning hours over 12 consecutive days, for example, as an intensive bootcamp? If so, how does this work with the milestones?
Yeah, so 60. We do deliver intensive if it's the right thing for your skills bootcamps to be delivered intensively. If it's the right thing for that target audience, and you're going to, then absolutely, that's absolutely fine. So you would, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we would just get to the once they've. I think you'd almost be claiming all at the same time, wouldn't you? Potentially, it would be absolutely fine. Yeah, we'll just look at that once that training's finished. You're almost claiming it at that point. We wouldn't be able to pay any earlier, so it would be sort of like 2 weeks in before you got your first payment. But then I think you'd almost get your completion payment, your second milestone payment, very quickly afterwards once they had the interview. So we wouldn't be able to pay it any earlier, unfortunately. So it would be sort of waiting those 2 weeks.
That is it for questions at the moment.
Did anybody else have any questions? If we give you a few minutes, I don't know whether you want to pop anything else into the chat that you may want to ask, or or you could raise your hand. You might not want to put your camera on, she'll end up on the recording, but I'll just give you a few minutes because I know we talked through that fairly quickly, didn't we? But if you, just do pop it in the chat if you've got anything else you want to ask us. I've just seen, so all the paperwork is on the website now, so that's great. So you can, after this call, you can jump straight on there and have a look at that. There is an FAQ document as well that we've put on there, which is kind of frequently asked questions that people have asked at these sessions before. So do have a read of that as well, because that's really useful. Have you got any questions, Sherry? Is that it?
No, that's it.
Well, thank you, everybody. We'll give you about a bit of time. Thank you for listening today. That's nice. Thank you, Dee, for your message. Yeah, thank you for listening today. The recording we'll try and get on this afternoon, won't we, Sherry? So yeah, if you do want to, if any of your colleagues haven't been able